Welcome back to Footnotes and Folly, and to the close of Herodotus' second book. I am Pemberton, this is part 12. The traveller saves his greatest marvels for the end. He shows us the labyrinth, a building of 3,000 rooms that he swears at as the pyramids themselves, and the vast man-made lake of Moeris. Then he returns to history. The Greeks can vouch for the 12 kings who ruled Egypt in uneasy partnership, and the one of them, Psammetichus, who won the whole land with the help of bronze-clad strangers from across the sea. We will sail Necos' ships clean around Africa, dig his canal, and arrive at last at Amasis, a man of no birth at all who joked and drank his way onto the throne and ruled it brilliantly. Let us finish the book.
Such is this labyrinth. But the lake called the Lake of Moeris, along the side of which the labyrinth is built, gives cause for even greater wonder. The measure of its circuit is 3,600 furlongs, that is 60 scoins, and this is the same number of furlongs as the extent of Egypt itself along the sea. The lake stretches lengthwise from north to south, and where it is deepest its depth is 50 fathoms. That this lake is artificial and made by digging is self-evident, for about the middle of the lake stand two pyramids, each rising above the water to a height of 50 fathoms, while the part built below the water is of exactly the same height. On each pyramid is placed a colossal stone statue sitting on a chair. Thus the pyramids are 100 fathoms high, and these 100 fathoms are equal to a furlong of 600 feet, the fathom being measured as 6 feet or 4 cubits, with each foot 4 palms and each cubit 6. The water in the lake does not come from the place where the lake lies, for that country is very deficient in water, but has been brought there from the Nile by a canal. For 6 months the water flows into the lake, and for 6 months it flows out again into the Nile. Whenever it flows out, then for those 6 months it brings into the royal treasury 1 talent of silver a day from the fish that are caught, and 20 pounds when the water comes in. The natives of the place also said that this lake had an underground outlet to the cities in Libya, turning toward the interior of the continent on the western side and running along by the mountain above Memphis. Since I did not see anywhere the earth dug out from this excavation, and that was a matter that caught my attention, I asked those who lived nearest the lake where the excavated earth was. They told me to what place it had been carried away, and I readily believed them, because I knew by report that a similar thing had been done at Nineveh, the city of the Assyrians. There certain thieves once formed a plan to carry away the wealth of Sardanapalus son of Ninus, the king, which was very great and was kept in treasuries underground. Starting from their own dwelling and calculating their direction, they dug underground toward the king's palace. The earth brought out from the excavation they used to carry away at night to the river Tigris, which flows by the city of Nineveh, until at last they accomplished what they desired. In a similar way, as I heard, the digging of the lake in Egypt was carried out, except that it was done not by night but during the day. As they dug, the Egyptians carried the excavated earth to the Nile, and the river, receiving it, would naturally bear it away and disperse it. Thus this lake is said to have been dug out. The 12 kings continued to rule justly, but in course of time the following happened. After sacrifice in the temple of Hephaestus, they were about to make libation on the last day of the feast. The chief priest, when bringing out the golden cups with which they had been accustomed to pour libations, miscounted and brought only 11 for the 12 kings. Then the one who stood last in order, Psammetichus, since he had no cup, took off from his head his helmet, which was of bronze, held it out to receive the wine, and proceeded to make libation. All the other kings also used to wear helmets, and they happened to have them then. Psammetichus held out his helmet with no treacherous intent. But the others took note of what Psammetichus had done and of the oracle, how it had been declared to them that whoever among them should make libation with a bronze cup would be sole king of Egypt. Remembering the saying of the oracle, they did not think it right to kill Psammetichus, since by examination they found that he had not acted with any forethought. But they determined to strip him of almost all his power and drive him away into the fen country, and from the fen country he was to have no dealings with the rest of Egypt. This Psammetichus had previously been a fugitive from the Ethiopian Sabokos, who had killed his father Necos. From him then, Psammetichus had fled to Syria, and when the Ethiopian departed, because of the vision in his dream, the Egyptians of the district of Sais brought Psammetichus back to his own country. Later, when he was king, it was his fate to be a fugitive a second time because of the helmet, driven by the 11 kings into the fen country. So, considering that he had been gravely wronged by them, he thought how he might take vengeance on those who had driven him out. He sent to the oracle of Leto in the city of Buto, where the Egyptians have their most truthful oracle, and the reply given to him was that vengeance would come when men of bronze appeared from the sea. He was very unwilling to believe that bronze men would come to help him. But after no long time had passed, certain Ionians and Carians who had sailed out for plunder were compelled to come ashore in Egypt. When they landed, they were clothed in bronze armor. One of the Egyptians, who had never before seen men clothed in bronze armor, came to the fen country and reported to Psammetichus that bronze men had come from the sea and were plundering the plain. Psammetichus perceived that the saying of the oracle was being fulfilled, treated the Ionians and Carians in a friendly way, and with great promises persuaded them to take his side. Then, when he had persuaded them, with the help of those Egyptians who favored his cause, and of these foreign mercenaries, he overthrew the kings. Having thus gained power over all Egypt, Psammetichus made for Hephaestus the gateway of the temple at Memphis that faces the south wind. He also built a court for Apries, in which Apries is kept when he appears opposite the temple gateway. This court is surrounded entirely with pillars and covered with figures, and instead of columns there stand colossal statues 12 cubits high to support the roof of the court. Apries in the tongue of the Hellenes is Epaphos. To the Ionians and Carians, who had helped him, Psammetichus granted portions of land to live in, opposite one another with the river Nile between them, and these were called encampments. These portions of land he gave them, and besides this he paid them all that he had promised. Moreover, he placed Egyptian boys with them to be taught the Hellenic tongue, and from these boys, who learned the language thoroughly, the present class of interpreters in Egypt is descended. The Ionians and Carians occupied these portions of land for a long time. They are toward the sea, a little below the city of Bubastes, on what is called the Pelusian mouth of the Nile. Later, King Amasis removed these men from there and established them at Memphis, making them into a guard for himself against the Egyptians. Since they settled in Egypt, we Hellenes know, through intercourse with them, the certainty of everything that happened in Egypt beginning from King Psammetichus and afterward, for these were the first men of foreign language who settled in Egypt. In the land from which they were removed, there still remained down to my time the sheds where their ships were drawn up and the ruins of their houses. Thus, Psammetichus obtained Egypt. I have often mentioned before the oracle that is in Egypt, and now I will give an account of it, since it is worthy to be described. This oracle in Egypt is sacred to Leto, and it is established in a great city near that mouth of the Nile called Sebennytic, as one sails up the river from the sea. The name of the city where the oracle is found is Buto, as I have said before when mentioning it. In this Buto there is a temple of Apollo and Artemis, and the temple house of Leto, in which the oracle is both great in itself and has a gateway 10 fathoms high. But among the things to be seen there, what caused me the greatest wonder I will now tell. In this sacred enclosure there is a house of Leto made of one single stone in both height and length, with all its walls equal in these two directions, each being 40 cubits. For the covering of the roof another stone lies on top, the cornice measuring 4 cubits. This house, then, of all the things I saw in that temple, is the most marvelous. Among the things next in wonder is the island called Chemis. It is situated in a deep and broad lake beside the temple at Buto, and the Egyptians say that this island is a floating island. I myself did not see it either floating about or moved from its place, and I am surprised when I hear of it, wondering whether it truly is a floating island. In this island of which I speak there is a great temple house of Apollo, and 3 separate altars are set up within. Many palm trees and other trees are planted on the island, both fruit-bearing and not fruit-bearing. When the Egyptians say that it is floating, they add the story. In this island, which formerly was not floating, Leto, being one of the 8 gods who came into existence first and dwelling in the city of Buto where she has this oracle, received Apollo from Isis as a charge and preserved him, hiding him in the island that is now said to be floating, at the time when Typhon came after him, searching everywhere and desiring to find the son of Osiris. They say that Apollo and Artemis are children of Dionysus and Isis, and that Leto became their nurse and preserver. In the Egyptian tongue Apollo is Oros, Demeter is Isis, and Artemis is Bubastes. From this story, and from no other, Aeschylus son of Euphorion took the point in which he differs from all earlier poets, namely that he represented Artemis as the daughter of Demeter. For this reason, they say, the island became a floating island. Such is the story they tell. As for Psammetichus, he was king over Egypt for 54 years. Of these for 29 years he sat before Azotos, a great city of Syria, besieging it, until at last he took it. Of all the cities we know of, this Azotos held out for the longest time under siege. The son of Psammetichus was Necos, and he became king of Egypt. This man was the first to attempt the canal leading to the Erythraean Sea, which Darius the Persian afterward completed. The length of this canal is a voyage of 4 days, and it was dug broad enough that 2 triremes could go side by side, driven by oars. The water is brought into it from the Nile. The canal is conducted a little above the city of Bubastes, by Patumos the Arabian city, and runs into the Erythraean Sea. It is dug first along those parts of the plain of Egypt that lie toward Arabia, just above which run the mountains extending opposite Memphis, where the stone quarries are. Along the base of these mountains the canal runs from west to east for a great distance. After that it is directed toward a break in the hills and tends from these mountains toward midday and the south wind, to the Arabian Gulf. In the place where the journey is shortest and least from the northern sea to the southern sea, which is also called Erythraean, that is from Mount Casion, the boundary between Egypt and Syria, the distance is exactly 1,000 furlongs to the Arabian Gulf. But the canal is much longer, since it is more winding. In the reign of Necos, 120,000 Egyptians perished while digging it. Necos stopped in the middle of his digging, because the utterance of an oracle hindered him, saying that he was working for the barbarian, and the Egyptians call all men barbarians who do not agree with them in speech. After Necos stopped work on the canal, he turned to waging wars. He had triremes built, some for the northern sea and others in the Arabian Gulf for the Erythraean Sea, and the sheds for these ships can still be seen. He used these ships whenever he needed them. On land, Necos fought the Syrians at Magdalos and conquered them. After this he took Cadides, a great city of Syria. The clothing he wore when he made these conquests he dedicated to Apollo, sending it to Branched Eye of the Milesians. After this, having reigned 16 years in all, he ended his life and handed the kingdom unto his son Psammes. While this Psammes was king of Egypt, men sent by the Eleans came to him. They boasted that they arranged the contest at Olympia in the most just and honorable way possible, and they thought that not even the Egyptians, the wisest of men, could discover anything further to add to their rules. When the Eleans came to Egypt and stated why they had come, the king called together those Egyptians reputed to be the wisest. When the Egyptians had assembled, they heard the Eleans tell everything that it was their part to do concerning the contest. After relating everything, the Eleans said they had come to learn whether the Egyptians could discover anything more just than this. The Egyptians consulted together and asked the Eleans whether their own citizens took part in the contest. They answered that anyone who wished, both of their own people and of the other Hellenes equally, was permitted to take part. At this the Egyptians said that in arranging the games so, they had wholly missed the mark of justice, for it could not be otherwise than that they would favor the man of their own state if he were competing, and so act unfairly toward the stranger. If they truly wished, as they said, to arrange the games justly, and if this was why they had come to Egypt, the Egyptians advised them to arrange the contest so that strangers alone could compete, and that no Elean should be permitted to compete. Such was the suggestion made by the Egyptians to the Eleans. When Psammes had been king of Egypt for only 6 years, and had made an expedition to Ethiopia, he immediately afterward ended his life, and Apries the son of Psammes inherited the kingdom. This man became the most prosperous of all the kings up to that time, except only his forefather Psammetichus. He reigned 25 years, during which he led an army against Sidon and fought a sea battle with the king of Tyre. Since, however, evil was fated to come upon him, it came through an event that I shall relate at greater length in the Libyan history, but for now only briefly. Apries sent a great expedition against the Cyrenians, and met with a correspondingly great disaster. The Egyptians considered him to blame for this and revolted from him, supposing that Apries had deliberately sent them out to evident calamity so that, as they said, there might be a slaughter of them, and he might rule more securely over the other Egyptians. Indignant at this, both those who had returned from the expedition and the friends of those who had perished openly revolted. When Apries heard this, he sent Amasis to them to make them stop by persuasion. Amasis came and tried to restrain the Egyptians, speaking to them and telling them not to do this. As he was speaking, one of the Egyptians stood up behind him and put a helmet on his head, saying as he did so that he put it on to crown him king. This act was in some degree not unwelcome to Amasis, as he proved by his behavior. As soon as the revolting Egyptians had set him up as king, he prepared to march against Apries. When Apries heard this, he sent to Amasis one of the Egyptians about his own person, a man of reputation named Paterbemis, ordering him to bring Amasis alive into his presence. When Paterbemis came and summoned Amasis, the latter happened to be sitting on horseback. He lifted up his leg and behaved indecently, telling Paterbemis to take that back to Apries. Nevertheless, they say, Paterbemis demanded that he go to the king, since the king had sent to summon him. Amasis answered that he had for some time been preparing to do so, and that Apries would have no occasion to find fault with him. Then Paterbemis, perceiving his intention from what he said, and also seeing his preparations, departed in haste, wishing to make known to the king as quickly as possible what was being done. When he returned to Apries without bringing Amasis, the king paid no regard to what he said, but moved by violent anger, ordered his ears and nose to be cut off. The rest of the Egyptians who still remained on Apries' side, when they saw the most reputable man among them suffer this shameful outrage, waited no longer, but joined the others in revolt, and delivered themselves over to Amasis. When Apries heard this too, he armed his foreign mercenaries and marched against the Egyptians. He had around him Carian and Ionian mercenaries to the number of 30,000, and his royal palace was in the city of size, large and worthy to be seen. Apries and his army were going against the Egyptians, and Amasis and those with him were going against the mercenaries. Both sides came to the city of Memphis and were about to test one another in battle. Now among the Egyptians there are 7 classes. One class is called the priests, another the warriors, and the others are cowherds, swineherds, shopkeepers, interpreters, and boatmen. This is the number of the Egyptian classes, and their names are given from the occupations they follow. Of these the warriors are called Calasyrians and Hermotybians, and they belong to the following districts, for all Egypt is divided into districts. The districts of the Hermotybians are Busiris, Sais, Chimis, Paprimus, the island called Prosopitis, and half of Natho. From these districts come the Hermotybians, who reached, when most numerous, the number of 160,000. Not one of them has learned any handicraft, but they are entirely devoted to war. The districts of the Calasyrians are Thebes, Bubastes, Athais, Tanis, Mens, Sibonitos, Athribus, Pharbaethos, Thmuis, Anaphis, Enites, and Myakphoris, this last being on an island opposite the city of Bubastes. These are the districts of the Calasyrians, and they reached, when most numerous, the number of 250,000 men. It is not lawful for these any more than for the others to practice any craft. They practice only what has to do with war, handing down the tradition from father to son. Whether the Hellenes also learned this from the Egyptians, I am not able to say for certain, since I see that the Thracians, Scythians, Persians, Lydians, and almost all the barbarians consider those of their citizens who learn trades, and their descendants, less honorable than the rest, while those who are free from all practice of manual arts are accounted noble, especially those devoted to war. However that may be, the Hellenes have all learned this, and especially the Lacedaemonians. The Corinthians, however, least of all cast slight upon those who practice handicrafts. The following privilege was specially granted to this class, and to no other Egyptians except the priests. Each man had 12 yokes of land specially granted to him free from taxes. A yoke of land measures 100 Egyptian cubits each way, and the Egyptian cubit happens to be equal to that of Samos. This was a special privilege granted to all. They also received certain advantages in turn, not the same men twice. Each year, 1,000 Calasyrians and 1,000 Hermotybians served as the king's bodyguard. These men, besides their yokes of land, had a daily allowance given to each man of 5 pounds weight of bread, 2 pounds of beef, and 4 pints of wine. This was the allowance given to those serving as the king's bodyguard at the time. So when Apries, leading his foreign mercenaries, and Amasis, at the head of the whole body of the Egyptians, approached one another and came to the city of Memphis, they engaged in battle. Although the foreign troops fought well, they were far fewer in number, and were defeated because of this. Apries is said to have believed that not even a god could cause him to cease from his rule, so firmly did he think it was established. In that battle, then, he was defeated, and being taken alive, was brought away to the city of Sais, to what had formerly been his own dwelling, but from then on was the palace of Amasis. There he was kept for some time in the palace, and Amasis treated him well. But at last the Egyptians blamed Amasis, saying that he did not act rightly in keeping alive the man who was the greatest enemy both to them and to him. Therefore he delivered Apries over to the Egyptians. They strangled him, and afterward buried him in the burial place of his fathers. This is in the temple of Athene, close to the sanctuary, on the left hand as one enters. The men of Sais buried all the kings of this district within the temple. The tomb of Amasis also is within the court of the temple, though it is farther from the sanctuary than that of Apries and his forefathers. It consists of a very large stone colonnade, with pillars carved to imitate date palms and otherwise sumptuously adorned. Within the colonnade are double doors, and inside the doors is a burial chamber. Also at Sais there is the burial place of him whom I do not consider it pious to name in connection with such a matter. It is in the temple of Athene behind the house of the goddess, stretching along the whole wall of it. In the sacred enclosure stand great stone obelisks, and near them is a lake adorned with a stone edging and fairly made in a circle, equal in size, as it seemed to me, to the one called the Round Pool in Delos. On this lake they perform by night the show of his sufferings, and this the Egyptians call mysteries. I know more fully in detail how these things take place, but I shall leave this unspoken. As for the mystic rites of Demeter, which the Hellenes call the Smephoria, although I know about these too, I shall leave unspoken everything except so much as piety permits me to tell. The daughters of Danaus were the ones who brought this rite out of Egypt and taught it to the women of the Pelasgians. Afterward, when all the inhabitants of Peloponnese were driven out by the Dorians, the rite was lost, and only those Peloponnesians who were left behind and not driven out, namely the Arcadians, preserved it. After Apries had thus been overthrown, Amasis became king. He was of the district of Sais, and the name of the city from which he came was Sif. At first the Egyptians despised Amasis and held him in no great regard, because he had been a man of the people and came from no distinguished family. But afterward Amasis won them over to himself by wisdom, and not by willfulness. Among the countless valuable things he possessed was a gold foot basin in which both Amasis himself and all his guests always washed their feet. He broke this up, had it made into the image of a god, and set it up in the city where it was most convenient. The Egyptians continually went to visit the image and showed it great reverence. Then Amasis, having learned what the people of the city were doing, called the Egyptians together and made the matter known to them. He said that the image had been made from the foot basin into which formerly the Egyptians used to vomit and urinate, and in which they washed their feet, whereas now they showed it great reverence. Just so, he continued, had he himself now fared, like the foot basin, for although formerly he had been a man of the people, now he was their king. Accordingly he bade them honor him, and have regard for him. In this way Amasis won the Egyptians over to himself, so that they consented to be his subjects. His ordering of affairs was as follows. In the early morning, until the time when the market filled, he willingly attended to the business brought before him. After this, he spent his time drinking, jesting with his drinking companions, and behaving in a frivolous and playful way. His friends, troubled by this, admonished him with words like these. "O king, you do not govern yourself rightly by letting yourself sink into such trifling behavior. You ought instead to sit all day in dignity upon a dignified throne and administer your business. Then the Egyptians would be assured that they are ruled by a great man, and you would have a better report. As it is, you are acting in no kingly fashion. Those who have bows string them when they wish to use them, and when they have finished using them they loosen them again. If bows were always kept stretched tight, they would break, so that men could not use them when they needed them. So it is with the condition of man. If he were always serious, and did not relax himself for sport at the proper time, he would either go mad, or be struck senseless before he knew it. Knowing this well, I distribute a portion of time to each of the two ways of living. Thus he answered his friends. It is said, however, that even when Amasis was a private man, he loved drinking and jesting, and was not at all seriously disposed. Whenever his means of living failed him because of his drinking and luxurious habits, he would go about and steal. Those from whom he stole would accuse him of having their property, and when he denied it they would bring him before the judgment of an oracle, whenever there was one in their place. Many times he was convicted by the oracles, and many times he was acquitted. When at last he became king, he acted as follows. As many gods as had acquitted him and declared him not to be a thief, to their temples he paid no attention, gave nothing for their further adornment, and did not even visit them to offer sacrifice, considering them worthless and their oracles false. But as many as had convicted him of being a thief, to these he paid very great regard, considering them truly gods and their oracles not false. First, at size, he built and completed for Athene a temple gateway that is a great marvel, far surpassing all who had done the like before, both in height and greatness, so large and excellent are the stones. Secondly, he dedicated great colossal statues and very large man-headed sphinxes, and for restoration he brought other stones of monstrous size. Some of these he had brought from the quarries opposite Memphis, and others, of very great size, from the city of Elephantine, which is a voyage of not less than 20 days from size. Of them all, I marvel most at this, a monolithic chamber that he brought from the city of Elephantine. They were 3 years engaged in bringing it, and 2,000 men were appointed to convey it, all of them from the class of boatmen. The outside length of this house is 21 cubits, its breadth 14 cubits, and its height 8. These are the outside measurements of the monolithic house. Inside, its length is 18 cubits and 5/6 of a cubit, its breadth 12 cubits, and its height 5 cubits. It lies beside the entrance to the temple. They did not draw it inside the temple because, as the story says, while the house was being drawn along, its chief craftsman groaned aloud, seeing that much time had been spent, and that he was worn out by the work, and Amasis took this to heart as a warning and did not allow them to draw it farther. Some say, on the other hand, that one of the men heaving it with levers was killed by it, and that it was not drawn in for that reason. Amasis also dedicated works worth seeing for their size and all the other temples of renown. Among them was, at Memphis, the colossal statue lying on its back in front of the temple of Hephaestus, whose length is 75 feet. On the same base, made of the same stone, stand 2 colossal statues, each 20 feet long, one on one side and one on the other side of the large statue. There is also another stone statue of the same size at size, lying in the same manner as the one at Memphis. Moreover, Amasis was the one who built and completed for Isis her temple at Memphis, which is very large and well worth seeing. In the reign of Amasis, it is said, Egypt became more prosperous than at any earlier time, both in what came to the land from the river and in what came from the land to its inhabitants, and at that time the inhabited towns in Egypt numbered 20,000 in all. Amasis also established the law that every year each Egyptian should declare to the ruler of his district the source from which he got his livelihood. If any man did not do this, or did not declare an honest way of living, he was to be punished with death. Solon the Athenian received this law from Egypt and had it enacted for the Athenians, and they have continued to observe it, since it is a law with which no one can find fault. Moreover, Amasis became a lover of the Hellenes. Among other proofs of friendship that he gave to several of them, he also granted the city of Naucratis to those who came to Egypt and wished to settle there. To those who did not wish to stay, but made voyages there, he granted portions of land on which to set up altars and make sacred enclosures for their gods. Their greatest enclosure, the one with the greatest name and most frequented, is called the Hellenion. It was established in common by the following cities: of the Ionians, Chios, Teos, Phocaea, and Clesymnae; of the Dorians, Rhodes, Cnidus, Halicarnassos, and Faeslis; and of the Iolians, Mytilene alone. To these cities this enclosure belongs, and they are the cities that appoint the superintendents of the port. All other cities that claim a share in it make that claim without any right. Besides this, the Aeginetans established on their own account a sacred enclosure dedicated to Zeus, the Samians one to Hera, and the Milesians one to Apollo. In old times Naucratis alone was an open trading place, and no other place in Egypt was. If anyone came to any other of the mouths of the Nile, he was compelled to swear that he had not come there of his own will. After swearing his innocence in this way, he had to sail with his ship to the Canobic mouth, or if it was not possible to sail because of contrary winds, he had to carry his cargo around the head of the delta in boats to Naucratis. Thus highly was Naucratis privileged. Moreover, when the Amphictyons had let out the contract for building the temple that now exists at Delphi, agreeing to pay 300 talents, because the former temple there had burned down of itself, it fell to the people of Delphi to provide the fourth part of the payment. Accordingly, the Delphians went about to various cities and collected contributions. In doing this they got as much from Egypt as from any place, for Amasis gave them 1,000 talents weight of alum, while the Hellenes living in Egypt gave them 20 pounds of silver. Amasis also made an agreement of friendship and alliance with the people of Cyrene. He resolved as well to marry a wife from there, whether because he desired to have a wife of Hellenic race, or apart from that, because of friendship for the people of Cyrene. In any case, he married a woman whom some say was the daughter of Batos, others of Archesilaus, and others of Critibulos, a man of repute among the citizens. Her name was Laodice. Whenever Amasis lay with her, he found himself unable to have intercourse, though with his other wives he associated as usual. When this happened repeatedly, Amasis said to his wife Laodice, "Woman, you have given me drugs, and you shall surely perish more miserably than any other woman." Laodice denied it, but Amasis was not at all appeased in his anger against her. So she made a vow in her heart to Aphrodite. If Amasis had intercourse with her that night, since this was the remedy for her danger, she would send an image to be dedicated to the goddess at Cyrene. Immediately after the vow, Amasis had intercourse with her, and from then on, whenever Amasis came into her, he had intercourse with her. After this he became very greatly attached to her. Laodice paid the vow she had made to the goddess, for she had an image made and sent it to Cyrene, and it was still preserved even to my own time, standing with its face turned away from the city of the Cyrenians. Cambyses, after conquering Egypt and hearing from Laodice who she was, sent her back unharmed to Cyrene. Amasis also dedicated offerings in Hellas, first at Cyrene an image of Athene covered with gold and a painted likeness of himself, then in the temple of Athene at Lindos 2 stone images and a linen corselet well worth seeing, and also at Samos 2 wooden figures of himself dedicated to Hera, which were still standing even in my own time in the great temple, behind the doors. At Samos he dedicated offerings because of the guest, friendship between himself and Polycrates son of Aix, at Lindos not because of any guest, friendship, but because the temple of Athene at Lindos is said to have been founded by the daughters of Danaus, who landed there while fleeing from the sons of Aegyptos. These offerings were dedicated by Amasis. He was also the first man to conquer Cyprus and subdue it so that it paid him tribute.
And there Herodotus closes his book of Egypt, with Amasis prosperous on his throne, the Greek traders thriving at Naucratis, and the whole ancient land richer and happier, he says, than it had ever been. It cannot last. Far to the east, Cambyses the Persian is still coming, and the war that Herodotus paused an entire book to postpone is about to fall on Egypt at last, which is exactly where Book 3 will begin. Thank you for walking the length of the Nile with me. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.